Welcome to the Neogenian Whisper and our Just Breathe series, where we fuse Eastern and Western philosophical orientations into something we hope is both calming and edifying to your rational discernment. I invite you to get comfortable right now and just breathe. We won't insist upon radical chakra realignment or levitation or the awakening of your kundalini. Not right away. We're going to go all Descartes on your ass this time. Wait, I'm like Trump with the Bible, holding it upside down, pretending to have read it. What a maroon look. We're going to have tonight's meditation in the Western rationalist sense of deep ideas worth thinking carefully about. Not in the sense of just turning off your mind and learning to be like your dog. Different senses of the word meditation. Tonight, we begin with a parable. A teaching story as told to me by my professor in logic and epistemology more than 20 years ago. How do I remember these things? It goes something like this. I once dated a young woman who refused to wear a seatbelt ever. Under any circumstances. It was because her brother had been in a terrible car accident. He wasn't buckled in, and the force of the impact actually removed him from the driver's side of the vehicle and deposited him into the passenger side. On the driver's side, the vehicle was massively crushed in, and of course the car was totaled, but the young man surprisingly sustained only minor injuries. Paramedics on the scene observed that if he had been buckled into the driver's seat, the impact surely would have killed him. No two ways about it, he would have been crushed. They told the family as much, and from that time forward, the sister refused ever to wear a seatbelt. She could not be reasoned with or convinced that her brother's accident represented an extraordinarily statistical anomaly, a fluke. It did not matter to her that in way more than 99% of all crashes, you are much better off with your seatbelt on. There's a mountain of empirical data to support that conclusion. But she had one vivid personal experience that touched her own family. And from that day forward, you couldn't get a seatbelt on her. Of course, I broke up with her because she was irrational. I'm kidding. We broke up, but for entirely different reasons. End of story. This is the way my professor in logic and epistemology, who also happened to be my academic advisor when I was an undergraduate. That's the way he taught us the fallacy of misleading vividness. I majored in philosophy in a humble state university setting many years ago so that you don't have to, unless you really want to. I don't have fancy credentials from a really prestigious school, but my professors did, and that's the kind of wisdom nugget that survives with me all these years later. I've thought about the girlfriend and the seatbelt story several times over the years, and I've thought about how that story, whether it happened for real and exactly in that way or not, made the concept of an important, informal, logical fallacy completely lucid and made it stick with me. I understand the fallacy of misleading vividness because of something I have decided to call apt vividness. Instead of a dry lecture presentation delivered in intellectual abstractions, and instead of glossing over, say, a dozen different logical fallacies in one lecture, our logic professor, Dr. Scott Davidson, made the fallacy of misleading vividness unforgettable with a girlfriend story. He used an anecdote from real life, presumably, as a parable, really, as a short teaching story with a limited number of scenes, settings, and characters. It's brief, it's easy to remember. It's something that most people can visualize happening as they hear about it. And it has high emotional stakes. Somebody almost died. That makes it stick. And what would happen to such a young woman? Your imagination goes wild, right? Would she one day be fated to sail through the windshield of a car and only realize from her back in a hospital bed where she's completely paralyzed that maybe she should not have overgeneralized from her brother's fluke experience? That maybe being better off without a seatbelt on doesn't run in families? Or would she luck out and never have to know, never have an accident, and go on believing whatever crazy thing she liked with perfect impunity? Both things are possible. Who can say? I certainly don't know. I can't be sure if this was even 100% a true-to-life story in the first place, but that also doesn't matter. What occurs to me every time I think of the story that Professor Davidson used to teach us a logical fallacy and make that lesson stick using a very brief, relatable human story, a parable. I think how that's like what Jesus or the Buddha are thought to have used to convey important moral teachings to their disciples. Short parables that anybody could understand. It's a time-tested pedagogical principle to teach in this way. It delivers to the student's mind what I have decided to dub apt vividness, because a brief, sensory vivid, high-stakes story with just a handful of relatable characters that communicates an accurate lesson in an unforgettable way has so much more human value than a complex lecture that is abstract, difficult, full of tangents, and so forgettable. Wouldn't you agree? This week's assignment is to meditate on apt versus misleading vividness. Now that you can identify it, now that you've learned about the fallacy of misleading vividness as a particular kind of hasty generalization, and you've learned it in an apt and vivid way via story, you can carry that knowledge with you just as I have done for more than 20 years. And I invite you to look for examples in your own experience of times when you or someone you know has reasoned poorly, let's say, based upon the emotional urgencies caused by misleading vividness. Tease apart the apt vividness of powerful storytelling that communicates accurately and well from the misleading vividness of everyday experiences that sometimes produce informal logical fallacies. Please tell me in a story in the comments down below about apt or misleading vividness, or both, in your own life experiences and the knowledge that you've drawn from those experiences through rational inference. I hope we'll see examples of faulty reasoning, yes, that wasn't fatal, but maybe could have been. Things that are safe to laugh about in retrospect. How about that? Please please share those stories. I also hope we'll see some powerful teaching stories in the comments that have resonated with you and brought any sort of positive lesson home for you. The apt vividness formulation that I've shared, I can't wait to read loads of great stories of both kinds down in the comments below. Please like, share, subscribe so that you don't miss a thing, and so that your philosophically inclined friends can likewise get in on this action without an expensive degree. Okay? It's also for anyone who comfortably can, please support the channel with a one-off donation in any amount from the link pinned at the top of the chat if you're seeing this as a live premiere, or in the video description below. Completely optional, very much appreciated. Thanks for joining us for this Neogenian exploration of apt versus misleading vividness. Stay tuned, as this is only the beginning, my friends. Ad Astra, and hail New Terra.